Hey everybody, this is Jason Snart. I'm going to be your professor here for English 1152 in the summer session. Just wanted to introduce myself and also give us a little orientation kind of walkthrough to our course. Not a lot of content about the course, but just sort of how it's laid out and maybe some tips or strategies for being successful, really for any course, honestly, but especially in the online format and especially in our condensed 5-week term. I think honestly the condensed term is potentially more challenging to deal with than the fact that we're online. Even if you've never done an online course before, it's not that different. I think the skill set is not that different from being successful in a fully face-to-face class. It's really the condensed time frame that can become, I think, most challenging. So the first thing that I'll sort of direct your attention to or suggest is, and it's so corny I hate even saying it, but like time management. Okay, that's pretty obvious. My one actual practical strategy, though, that you might want to think about is just as if you were taking this class or any class in the fully face-to-face format, imagine how many hours per week you'd actually be physically in the classroom. So in a 16-week format, if you're taking a 3-credit class, you're in there for about 3 hours, right? A 50-minute block on like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay. In our 5-week format, you almost sort of like have to triple all those numbers. And that's just in-class time. Forget about homework or any of the other out-of-class stuff that you'd be doing. And so I don't think, honestly, our class necessarily takes that much time every single week. And it clearly depends on like how quickly you work or how efficiently you can do things. So forget about that part of it. But just imagine if you had to block out that time on your schedule to be in a classroom face-to-face on, throughout the course of a week. That's a lot of hours that you'd have to block out. So you'd block those out because you have to be there in class face to face. So you wouldn't, schedule a dental appointment or mow your lawn or take the kids somewhere or go to another job or, do all of the other things that we have to get done in life, but you wouldn't double book yourself that way. And so I'm not going to suggest that you necessarily have to block out these massive, huge, hour after hour after hour where you just go to grind through our course. But I would suggest actually physically blocking out on your phone or your calendar, your digital or your day planner, whatever you use, time to invest in, completing work for our course. And not just one humongous block throughout the whole week, but a couple of smaller blocks, but enough time that you don't have other things competing for your attention. So it's sort of self-preservation in some ways, because I feel like one of the traps that people can sometimes fall into when taking an online course, and again, especially in our abbreviated format here, just the 5-week session, is they assume that because there's no physical set time that we have to meet, that the work for the course will just get done when all your other commitments are taken care of. So we sort of shuffle to the bottom of the to-do list, and I'm sure you can guess what happens. It never gets done. Or if it gets done, it's really rushed. It's always last minute. So you're not learning that much. The work is kind of panicked, so it's just not that terrific. So it's sort of a lose-lose all the way around. So time management, right, is the corny thing to say, but I think the one actually useful practical strategy is to really block out time for yourself where for these 5 weeks, and it flies by, trust me, these points during the week are going to be like your time to work on class material. And I think as we get into it, you'll get a better sense of like how much time, and of course the flexibility we have here is like when in the day you can be doing this. So we do have some flexibility, but it's not like there's no time involved because we're not physically meeting in a classroom. So hopefully that's not too like obvious or cliched, and is an actual practical strategy that you can bring into our course. So now our course, what it looks like. Okay, so our menu here to the left is, it might change a little bit like after we're past our first initial couple of days. I'll probably shuffle items like this one that you're seeing and then the orientation video, which you're watching here. I'll shuffle those down to the bottom, but it pretty much is what it is. For our purposes for the course, the most important links are going to be the units, which is where all the work is contained, all the assignments, access to discussion boards, all the requirements and expectations, etc., right? So that's an obvious one. And then, of course, the due dates. So I will take a quick look at both of these and we'll see how they're coordinated. It's not super complicated, but again, if we can just get used to that right out of the gate, then you can start being effective with the course content rather than fumbling around trying to like where do I find things, how do I navigate, etc., etc. Okay. Before we jump into that, though, obviously you can grab your grades here as we go. Many times there'll be a comment associated with that, so there'll be a number, but also maybe a little note about things. We have a virtual office here where we can meet. Again, send me an email. We can create a time that's convenient for both of us, and then we can meet virtually, which is nice, right? So we're not always just emailing back and forth. We don't have to do this, but if you're not around campus, but you'd still like to check in face-to-face, even 5 or 10 minutes, or virtually, but in real time, we can do that through the virtual office. My contact info's here. You can use these to send and check your COD email, and then a couple of generic library and Blackboard help resources. So kind of extra stuff, right, that you'll find in lots of different classes. Our syllabus is pretty straightforward. So again, course objectives, which we'll actually return to and try to foreground as we work through the class, but you can read those whenever you get a chance. Topical outline, basically some of the like topics or ideas that we'll run into. There's no textbook for the class. Every poem that we read for our class will be just linked in Blackboard, and it'll take you to usually the poetryfoundation.org is our kind of main resource that we'll use. But you do need a Google account. Most people have these already. If you use Gmail, then you have a Google account. That's the same credential that you can get into any of the tools that we'll use in our course, whether it's Google Docs, Google Drive, slides, sites, which is where we'll start, forms we'll use a little bit later. Your Gmail is your Google credential. So if you don't have one, you can grab one here. Obviously it's free. If you do have one but would prefer to have more of a school or professional one to create to keep those things separate, you can do that, but I leave that up to you. But you do need one to be successful in the course. Most of the syllabus is just course policy stuff. Again, you can read these when you get a chance. I think most of it is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But you'll notice that we don't, unlike a typical syllabus maybe, have like a day-by-day or week-by-week schedule. That's all built into our units and due dates link here. So rather than having this mile-long syllabus that you're always scrolling through, it makes sense to me for our online setting here is to pull those pieces out of the syllabus and actually build them as their own discrete things here in our course menu. So syllabus you can take a look at, but once you've got the basics of sort of our course policy and maybe taken a quick look at our objectives, I don't know that you'll necessarily even be returning to the syllabus very often throughout our course. Where you will go to, though, is the announcements page, right, which has nothing now but will populate as we go through. That's where you'll always land, so it's good to make sure that you're reading or watching whatever is there, making sure that maybe you scroll down in case you missed something potentially. So that's kind of your first checkpoint for coming into the class whenever you do. And then obviously the units and due dates, and I'll go to due dates first. I'd recommend kind of coming in here every time you log into Blackboard, even if you are pretty sure you know the due date that you're working on. It's always good to double check and also to kind of look forward, even though our pattern is pretty regular here. Just sort of reminding yourself of, okay, maybe I'm in the midst of doing this, but what else is going to be due here, and then maybe I can get a jump here, and that kind of thing. So keeping the big picture in mind, not just always like on Wednesday, I better get in there and do some work. So you'll notice our double due date system here for pretty much every unit except our very last one. This is set up so that every first due date listed is when all of the main work for a unit might be due, unless it's suggested otherwise in the unit itself, but for the most part, that's how it's going to work. So main work, main posts, main projects, documents, slide projects, whatever you're creating is always going to be due on that first due date listed. The second due date is only in place so there's a little bit of a gap for when we do, post your main work here, and then very often we'll have like a reply component, and that would happen here somewhere. So I'll return to this as we go through the course, but again, keep in mind that you don't have to wait till this due date to turn stuff in. And if people are turning stuff in, early-ish in the 5-week format, there's not a lot of early that happens. You can always jump in and do replies before necessarily waiting until after this date, for example, or until late in the day on that Thursday. Again, because of the condensed format, it often sometimes works that way, but keep in mind that we do have due dates, but it's not like you're having to wait until that last possible minute to either do the work, do the replies, or what you're going to find, I think, is that maybe you finish up what's assigned here, you're kind of maybe waiting, doing replies, but also maybe jumping up into here to at least take a look at what's on your plate moving forward. So you'll sort of find that these two pieces might overlap a little bit. And again, as we go through the various due dates. So obviously each due date has its unit correspondence here, and that will fit with how things are laid out here. So I've tried to compact things for our 5-week term, where our first unit is probably the easiest, just doing some basic introductions, and then we get into some much more labor-intensive units through here, and then returning us to those course objectives that we saw in the syllabus in our final reflection. So I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but I do want to show you sort of how they're set up. So we'll use our introductions unit here. So this one again is pretty straightforward. There's not really a lot to do other than get situated in the class, right? You'll be watching this orientation video, just sort of getting a feel for things. So only the one main assignment that we have here. I try to foreground the unit objectives. This will make a lot more sense once we're actually into the content of the course. But I want to point out how most of our units are set up. You'll see that I like to embed, in this case, Google Docs, right? So there's always this scrollable kind of frame set up. So make sure that once you're in here and you're scrolling in Blackboard, you don't realize that the thing cuts off here and you don't read the rest of the assignment. In most cases, it'll be obvious because it just like cuts off in the middle of like an image or a sentence or whatever. But again, make sure you're scrolling in that internal window to see all the way to the bottom of the assignment. I love the Google Doc because it's so easy to format in terms of text boxes, building in pictures to sort of walk you through how we're doing different things. In this case, setting up our portfolio using the new Google Sites Builder, which is why you need that Gmail or Google credential. So we're just starting out with an About Me page here, and we'll add to our portfolio that we build here in every unit as we go through our entire term. So it'll be built out. We don't have a lot of time in the 5-week format, but you'll be probably amazed at how much we cover. And it's really nice to look back at that portfolio that now contains in sequence all of the stuff that you've been doing for the class. But this is a good example of where the assignment is embedded, so we're scrolling in it. The assignment has us working in a tool that's outside of Blackboard for pretty obvious reasons, I think. But notice that the tool in Blackboard to sort of capture the work that everyone has been doing, and again, this is all explained in the assignment, so you don't have to just figure it out. But the tool we use in Blackboard is the discussion board tool. So this is clickable, always looking for that icon. It's actually explained down here. I don't know if I can scroll there, right? A reminder for what to look for. So you'll build your portfolio or do whatever the assignment is, create a doc, create a slide, do whatever in the assignment. But then there's almost always going to be a discussion board where you're not really discussing the thing, you're just posting the link to it. It's more just a convenience to gather everyone's links together and then connect what we're doing here directly to the grade book. So it's an organizational convenience more than anything else. Although it also does give us the opportunity to use the discussion board for the reply feature. Again, remembering that double due date system that we've got. So you build your portfolio page, you share the link in the discussion board here, that's your main work for the unit, and then you're going to visit other people's pages and do the reply. So again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds of individual units here, but just to walk you through how most of our course is set up. And most of the units will have not just one of these assignments like we do to get started here, but multiple assignments. So again, once you get into the unit, you really want to scroll through that whole thing and take a look at what's the readings I got to do, what are the assignments. Don't just start with the first thing and kind of start doing it without having a sense of that bigger picture. Okay, so again, welcome to the course. I look forward to meeting everybody, which is why we do this introductory page, just to get a sense of like who we are, who's in the class, why maybe people are here, what careers, hobbies, educational trajectories people are on, all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, once we finish that, sort of our introductions, we get right into the content for our class. And you'll see that most of the units are set up like the one that I just looked at. So again, once you arrive into Blackboard, and again, I would suggest checking in almost every day. That 5 weeks really flies by, but it's pretty intensive, so you really have to make the course kind of a top priority. So you'll be arriving in announcements, maybe there's a video to watch, a quick piece of text to read, whatever it might be. Then jumping into the due dates, just to sort of reacquaint yourself with what's the immediate due date, is there a turnaround for replies, what are the next due dates coming up, marking those on your calendar, and then obviously jumping into the units part and clearly tracking your grades as we go. So again, you can be in touch with me by email. I try to be super responsive really all the time, but especially in summer. We can set up a virtual office appointment if you want to talk in real time. The nice thing about the virtual office is we can share screens, so if you have a piece of writing or like a technical problem, you can't get something to work the way it's supposed to, I can actually see what's happening on your screen, and that makes it really good to troubleshoot. And then, of course, I'm here on campus, so if you are around taking other classes or you're, available to come to campus, we can always set up a face-to-face meeting as well. All right? So welcome to English 1152, poetry, more of the poetry analysis as opposed to writing, although we do some poetry writing here too. The 5 weeks flies by, so hopefully you are ready to go, and I look forward to meeting everybody and having you all meet each other.